Stop scrolling. I need you to see this right now. There is a claim spreading across Australian social media, Facebook groups, TikTok comment sections, WhatsApp chats between parents of learner drivers, and it says that certain categories of drivers in Australia are banned from driving at night, and people are believing it. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments from real drivers saying things like, "I didn't know this was a law," and "My instructor never told me this." Parents are telling their teenage children not to drive after dark. Learner drivers are refusing night driving hours they actually need to log. And here is the part that should genuinely alarm you. Some of what's being shared is a complete distortion of real rules, twisted just enough to sound credible, repeated just enough times to feel like established fact. Tonight on AU Driving Insider, we are pulling this apart completely. I'm going to show you exactly what the viral claim says, exactly where it comes from, exactly what it gets wrong, and exactly what Australian law actually says about night driving restrictions. Because the truth is more nuanced, more important, and, frankly, more interesting than anything that viral post told you. Don't go anywhere. The part that surprises most people is coming up in about 5 minutes, and you need to hear it. Welcome to AU Driving Insider, Australia's most trusted channel for real, verified, no-nonsense driving knowledge. If you found this video because you saw that viral post and something felt off about it, good. That instinct is correct, and you're in the right place. Subscribe now so you never have to rely on a social media post for your driving information again. Let's get into it. Let me set the scene properly, because context is everything here. Australia has one of the most comprehensive graduated licensing systems in the world. It's genuinely well-designed, carefully researched, and built around decades of road safety data. And within that system, there are absolutely real restrictions that apply to certain categories of drivers at night. That part is true. Night driving restrictions exist in Australia. They are real laws. They are enforceable. But, and this is the critical part, what those restrictions actually say, who they apply to, when they apply, and what they mean in practice is almost nothing like what the viral post claims. The post takes something real, strips away all the nuance, adds some invention, wraps it in confident language, and releases it into the world. And because it's built on a foundation of something true, it's much harder to immediately dismiss than pure fiction would be. That's what makes it so effective at spreading, and so dangerous. So let's start at the beginning. What does the viral claim actually say? In the version that's been circulating most widely, the claim goes something like this. Australia has introduced a ban on night driving for certain drivers, and this ban is stricter than anything previously in place. Some versions of the post specifically name learner drivers. Some versions extend the claim to provisional license holders. Some versions add invented specifics, particular hours, particular roads, particular states, that make it sound even more official. And in almost every version, the claim is presented as a new development, a recent rule change, something that came in quietly and that most people don't know about yet. That framing of secret new rule is a classic viral misinformation technique, by the way. It creates urgency, it flatters the sharer for being in the know, and it gives readers a reason to share it with others. But the rule isn't new, and it isn't what the post says it is. Here is what actually exists in Australian law regarding night driving restrictions. The restrictions are real, they are part of the graduated licensing system, they vary by state and territory, and they have been in place for years, not recently introduced. And importantly, they apply specifically and only to certain categories of provisional license holders under specific conditions in specific states. They are not a blanket ban, they are not new, and they have never applied to learner drivers in the way the post implies. Let's go state by state, because this is where the detail lives, and at AU Driving Insider, detail is what we do. In New South Wales, P1 provisional license holders, those are drivers in the first year of their provisional license, typically after completing their learner period and passing their driving test, face a genuine night driving restriction. P1 drivers in NSW cannot drive between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., with limited exceptions. This is a real enforceable rule. It exists because crash data consistently shows that young, inexperienced drivers face significantly elevated risk during late-night hours. A combination of lower traffic volume, creating a false sense of security, higher likelihood of fatigue, higher likelihood of driving with peer passengers who create distraction, and reduced visibility conditions that newer drivers haven't yet developed the skills to manage confidently. The restriction is evidence-based. It is targeted. It applies to P1 drivers specifically, not to learner drivers and not to P2 drivers who have progressed beyond the first provisional stage. In Victoria, the rules are structured differently. Victorian P license holders face passenger restrictions rather than time-based restrictions as the primary night driving control. However, there are additional rules around late-night driving that apply to drivers under a certain age and that interact with other conditions on their provisional license. The specific conditions are outlined in the VicRoads licensing framework, and they are not identical to what NSW requires. This is a perfect example of why a single viral post claiming to represent all of Australia is inherently misleading. Because Victoria's approach to the same road safety goal looks different from NSW's approach, and both are different again from Queensland's. In Queensland, the graduated licensing system uses a different framework again. Queensland P1 and P2 license holders face restrictions including passenger limits and certain driving condition limitations. But the specific night driving rules operate differently from those in NSW and Victoria. Queensland Transport's website outlines these clearly, and the details matter, because a Queensland P1 driver operating under the assumption that NSW rules apply to them could either be unknowingly breaking Queensland law or unnecessarily restricting themselves based on rules that don't actually govern their license. South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania, the Australian Capital Territory, and the Northern Territory each have their own versions of these rules, all drawing from the National Australian Road Rules framework, but implemented with local variations. The common thread across all of them is that graduated restrictions targeting inexperienced drivers in high-risk conditions are evidence-based, carefully designed, and have nothing to do with a sweeping night driving ban of the kind the viral post describes. Now here's the part one promised you earlier, the thing that surprises most people, even those who consider themselves fairly informed about Australian road rules. The night driving restrictions that exist for provisional drivers are not primarily about darkness. They are about the combination of factors that cluster around late-night driving specifically. Research from the Australian Road Research Board and state road safety agencies consistently shows that the crash risk for young drivers doesn't simply correlate with driving after sunset. It correlates specifically with driving in the window between approximately 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., and the reasons are layered and fascinating. First, fatigue. Human alertness follows a circadian rhythm, and for most people, particularly younger people, the late-night hours represent a genuine biological low point in alertness. The brain is not simply less stimulated at 1 a.m., it is physiologically less capable of rapid decision-making, hazard detection, and reaction time. This is not about willpower or attention, it's biology. And for a driver who is also inexperienced, who doesn't yet have thousands of hours of automatic driving behavior to fall back on, who is still consciously processing things that experienced drivers handle subconsciously. The combination of biological fatigue and skill inexperience creates a risk profile that is genuinely different from what either factor would create alone. Second, the social context of late-night driving for younger drivers. The data shows that young drivers involved in nighttime crashes are significantly more likely to have peer passengers in the vehicle compared to daytime crashes. Peer passengers, particularly same-age passengers, change driver behavior in measurable ways. They increase distraction, they create social pressure that affects speed decisions, gap acceptance at intersections, and response to perceived challenges from other drivers. The graduated licensing restrictions on passengers and on late-night driving are directly responsive to this data. They're not arbitrary. They're targeted interventions based on what the crash statistics actually show. Third, and this is the one that people find most counterintuitive, late-night roads are actually more dangerous for inexperienced drivers than busy daytime roads, even though they feel less threatening. The relative emptiness of roads between midnight and 4 a.m. creates a false sense of security. Speed tends to increase. Following distances tend to close. Attention tends to drift. And when something unexpected happens, a kangaroo on a regional road, a driver running a red light at a quiet intersection, an unexpected patch of gravel on a corner, the inexperienced driver has less margin for error and fewer automatic responses to draw on. The restriction to higher-risk late-night hours, specifically, rather than all-night driving, reflects exactly this pattern in the data. So when the viral post says, "night driving banned in Australia," what it's actually describing, in the most distorted possible way, is a carefully calibrated, evidence-based, time-specific restriction on a specific category of provisional license holders in specific states. The gap between that reality and the viral claim is enormous, and the consequences of misunderstanding that gap are real. Let's talk about those consequences specifically, because this matters for different categories of driver in different ways. For learner drivers and their supervising parents, the viral claim creates unnecessary anxiety about night driving hours that learners absolutely must complete as part of their logbook requirement. In NSW, learner drivers must log a minimum of 20 night driving hours out of their 120 total hours. These hours are not optional. They are a legal requirement for progressing to the license test. If a parent, having seen the viral post, decides that night driving is now somehow banned or restricted for their learner, and those night hours don't get completed, the learner driver cannot sit their test. The misinformation has a direct, practical, license delaying consequence. For P1 drivers who do have genuine night driving restrictions, the viral post creates a different problem. It misrepresents what the restriction actually says, which can lead drivers to misunderstand their obligations. Some versions of the post overstate the restriction in ways that might cause a P1 driver to think they cannot drive at night at all, when in fact the restriction only applies after 11 p.m. Others understate the restriction in ways that might cause a P1 driver to think the rule is less serious than it is. Neither outcome is acceptable, and both are traceable directly to the way the viral post strips nuance from a real, complex rule. For fully licensed drivers who are beyond the provisional stage, the viral post creates confusion about rules that simply do not apply to them, which wastes their time and erodes their trust in legitimate road rule communication when they eventually find out the post was wrong. Every piece of viral misinformation that gets debunked makes it slightly harder for real, important road safety information to land the next time it needs to. That's a societal cost that's easy to overlook but genuinely significant. Here's something I want to address directly, because I see it in the comments on these viral posts every single time. People say, well, even if the exact rule is wrong, at least it's making drivers more cautious at night, so what's the harm? And I understand the instinct behind that, but that reasoning is flawed in an important way. Road safety is built on accurate information, consistently applied. When drivers make decisions based on incorrect rules, even decisions that seem conservative or cautious, they are operating outside the framework that road safety researchers and traffic engineers have carefully designed. The restrictions that exist are where they are and how they are for specific data-supported reasons. A driver who avoids driving at 9 p.m. because they incorrectly believe it's restricted, but who then drives freely at midnight because they don't know that's when the actual restriction applies, has been made less safe by the misinformation, not more safe. Accuracy is not a technicality. It is the foundation of the whole system. So, what do you do with all of this? Here's the practical takeaway from everything we've covered today. If you are a learner driver in Australia, your night driving obligations depend on your state, and you need to check your specific state's road authority website for the exact hours required and how to log them correctly. You are not banned from driving at night. You are required to drive at night as part of your training. If you are a P1 provisional driver, you need to know the specific night driving restrictions that apply in your state, not the viral version, the actual version from the actual road authority website. In NSW, that's Transport for NSW. In Victoria, that's VicRoads. In Queensland, that's the Department of Transport and Main Roads. These websites have the actual rules, in plain language, for free, without the distortion of a social media algorithm deciding what gets amplified. If you are a fully licensed driver, there are no general night driving restrictions that apply to you beyond the standard road rules that apply at all times. Headlights on between sunset and sunrise, high beams managed correctly, speed adjusted for visibility conditions. No ban, no new restrictions, no secret rule that you missed. And if you see the viral post again, or one like it, you now have the knowledge to push back on it. Not aggressively, not dismissively, but with the actual information, calmly and clearly stated. Because every driver who shares accurate information instead of viral misinformation makes Australian roads slightly safer. That's not an overstatement. Road safety culture is built on this kind of ground-level, driver-to-driver accuracy, and every one of us has a role to play in it. At AU Driving Insider, this is what we show up to do every single week. Not to tell you what sounds good, not to repeat what's getting shares, to give you what's actually true, what's actually verifiable, and what actually helps you drive safely and legally on Australian roads. That commitment doesn't waver, and it's why this community keeps growing. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you seen this viral post? Did you believe it before watching this video? Has anyone in your life changed their driving behavior because of it? Drop your answer in the comments below, because the conversation that happens in this community genuinely helps other drivers find clarity. And if this video helped you get to the truth today, hit that like button. It is the single most powerful thing you can do to help AU Driving Insider reach more Australian drivers who need accurate information like this. Subscribe if you haven't already, ring that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Drive safe, drive informed, and never let a viral post tell you what Australian road rules say.